The studio lights flickered, and in the silence that followed, Eminem saw his reflection in the mirror smirking back at him, even though he hadn't moved a muscle. Detroit's night was the kind that felt older than the city itself. A night so still it seemed to fold over the streets and keep them hidden. The snow outside had hardened into glassy black ice under the weight of a bitter wind, and every lamp that hummed along the sidewalks cast halos too wide, like the light was searching for something that wasn't there inside the studio. Marshall wandered the empty halls like a ghost. Everyone else had gone. The last engineer had tapped him on the shoulder, said goodnight, and disappeared. Hours ago. Even the vending machine down the hall, the one that always coughed and buzzed as though it had asthma, was quiet now, unplugged or simply dead. The whole building felt hollow, a shell, but Marshall couldn't leave. His body buzzed with that restless electricity he'd known since he was a kid, the same itch that made him scribble bars in notebooks until dawn, the same pulse that had once been both salvation and prison. He wasn't thinking about a track. He wasn't thinking about sleep either. He was just pacing, like something in the walls wanted him to keep moving. He slowed in one corridor he'd walked 100 times before. Posters of old sessions lined the walls, frames crooked from years of neglect. A coffee stain on the carpet spread like a map. He knew every detail. He could have walked this hallway blind, and yet there was a door. He stopped dead, head tilting it. It was plain, white paint, faint shine under the fluorescent hum. No handle, no number. Just a flat door that shouldn't have been there. He stared at it long enough that he almost convinced himself it was a trick of exhaustion. Some hallucination cooked up by tired eyes. But the longer he stared, the more real it became. The edges were sharp, the surface clean, and his gut told him something ugly. It had always been there, waiting, and only now had he noticed. "Okay," he muttered, running a hand down his hoodie. "That's new." He stepped closer, shoes whispering. Against the carpet, he reached out. The surface was warmer than it should have been, almost like skin. His breath fogged faintly against it. The hair on his arms rose. He pressed. The door swung inward without a sound. The room beyond wasn't a room. It was light, sterile, humming, too clean to belong anywhere in this building. There was no bulb he could point to, no lamp, no source. Just a white glow that poured from nowhere and everywhere at once. And the walls were mirrors, not funhouse. Mirrors, not glass that bent or warped. These were flawless, seamless panes that stretched floor to ceiling, reflecting him back and back, hundreds of Marshalls lined up in perfect repetition, fading into infinity. He stepped inside on instinct, sneakers squeaking on a floor so polished, it felt slick, like ice. His movements echoed too loudly, the sound bouncing from glass to glass until it felt multiplied. He turned, looking for the door behind him. It was gone. In its place, more mirrors, more him. His stomach tightened. "Cool," he muttered under his breath, sarcasm the only weapon he had. Some kinda art project, right? Some freak setup. His voice didn't echo normally. It came back layered, distorted, as if 10 voices spoke at once. All his own. He lifted a hand. Every reflection lifted theirs to perfect mimicry. For a moment, he almost relaxed. Then he noticed it. One DIDN, single quotes to, halfway down the tunnel of infinity. One reflection froze. Marshall's throat locked. He waved his hand again. 100 versions of him moved. One did not. And then, slowly, its mouth curled into a smirk. It was his face down to every scar, every line of exhaustion, but the smile wasn't his. Sharp, deliberate, a grin that promised knowledge he didn't want. Marshall stumbled back, sneakers squeaking too loud in the sterile quiet. "Nah," he muttered, voice shaking. "Nope, no way." The frozen reflection tilted its head. The mirrors around it rippled faintly, like water stirred by unseen fingers. Then its lips moved. "Come closer." No sound, just the shape of the words. Marshall's breath caught. His eyes darted to where the door had been. Nothing but mirrors now. His heart drummed hard against his ribs. Around him, other reflections began to change. At first, subtle, their lips moved without him. Palms pressed harder to the glass, smearing against it. Faces twisted with urgency, eyes wide, mouths opening in silent screams. Hundreds of versions of him, begging, not in words he could hear, but in desperation he could feel. "Don't go," but the one that smirked. Calm, still, patient, its eyes locked on his dot. The hum of the light above deepened, vibrating in his teeth. The floor shuddered beneath his shoes. His vision swam as the walls seemed to bend inward, narrowing. He pressed his hands to his temples, shaking his head. "This ain't real," he whispered, though the words did nothing to stop the truth pressing in. When he opened his eyes, the smirking reflection was closer. He hadn't moved, but it was closer, as if the tunnel of mirrors had shortened, pulling him nearer. Its lips moved again, soon. The glass around it rippled harder. Cracks like veins spidered across some panes, though no sound followed. Marshall's legs wavered. He backed up until his shoulders hit cold glass. Behind him, a dozen versions of himself slammed their palms against the mirror, mouths screaming soundlessly. Sweat dripped down his spine. His hoodie clung to his skin. His breath fogged the glass. His pulse raced until it felt like it belonged to the room, not to him. For the first time in his life, Marshall was terrified of his own reflection. The room had a heartbeat. At first, Marshall thought it was his own pulse, hammering too hard in his ears. But the longer he stood in that impossible chamber, the clearer it became. The sound wasn't inside him. It came from the mirrors, slow, steady like bass buried beneath static. The glass wasn't reflecting him, it was listening to him. He dragged a hand over his face, trying to laugh it off. "It's just mirrors," he muttered. "Just glass, just me being tired." His voice didn't echo normally. It came back layered, multiplied, as if 10 Marshalls spoke at once. He lifted his right hand. Every reflection lifted theirs, except the one with the smirk. That version only stared, still and patient, head tilted slightly as if amused. He whispered, throat dry. He reached into his hoodie pocket and felt something familiar. A Sharpie. He didn't remember putting it there, but muscle memory had always been his shadow. He uncapped it with his teeth, pressed the tip to the nearest pane, and drew a single dot. 100 dots appeared at once. The smell of ink rose sharp and chemical. He exhaled with shaky relief. Then he looked down the tunnel. The smirking reflection's glass was spotless. His stomach dropped. He drew another dot, then 4 in a small square. Again, every mirror copied him except that one. It was clean, perfect, untouched. The laugh that pushed up in his throat came out jagged. "Why you different?" The reflection tilted its head. A fraction more, the smirk widening. He pressed his palm flat to the glass nearest him. It was cold, so cold it burned. For an instant, He swore it gave beneath his skin, as if something with flesh pressed back. A thin crack spidered out across the surface, racing like lightning before sealing itself instantly, as though embarrassed. Marshall stumbled back, heart skipping. Around him, the reflections changed. Some moved without him. One slammed fists against the glass, screaming silently. Another pressed its forehead to the pane, eyes pleading. Dozens lifted their palms, desperate, begging. But the smirking one, calm, still, patient, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He yanked it free, desperate for something familiar. No calls, no texts, just the lock screen glowing with a single word. Where the flashlight icon should have been, listen. His chest tightened. Listen to what the mirrors answered. A sound scraped from behind the glass, fingernails dragging down slowly, multiplied 100-fold until it became rhythm. Tap drag. Tap drag. It was a beat. His beat. His own flow stripped bare of words. The room had learned his cadence. The smirking reflection pressed its palm harder to the glass, breath fogging the pane from the wrong side. Letters formed in the mist. Turn around. Marshall froze. His gut twisted in the mirrors to his left. He saw versions of himself obeyed, whipping round, eyes blown wide. Some staggered, clutching their throats. One slammed his back against the mirror and slid down it, mouthing a silent plea. Marshall clenched his jaw. I don't turn my back on you. His own voice shook the glass. The fogged words shifted. Then, step. He lifted one foot and slid it forward. The tunnel rippled. For a fraction of a second, the reflections broke. He saw not more glass, but a hallway beyond, long and narrow, ending in a faint red glow. Exit. His chest seized. He blinked and it was gone. Only mirrors again. Only his smirking double. He stepped. Again, the heartbeat stuttered, then doubled in tempo. Cracks skittered across some panes before healing themselves. The smirking reflection narrowed its eyes. Another step. Every reflection slammed palms to glass in unison, mouths screaming silently. The force pressed against him, invisible but crushing, shoving him back toward the center. He braced himself, planted his feet, and shoved his shoulder into the seam of two mirrors. His fingers hooked into the faint line, pulling until his joints screamed. The glass bowed just a little. A sigh escaped cold air from somewhere beyond. His pulse leaped open. He growled, sweat stinging his eyes. Open, the seam gave with a wet pop. The gap widened enough for a forearm. Cold air spilled out, carrying the smell of dust and paint. And in the dark beyond, the exit sign flared brighter. Marshall's teeth bared in something halfway between a smile and a snarl. The smirking reflection frowned for the first time. Its breath fogged the glass and scrawled new words. No tragic, second chances. Marshall didn't hesitate. He shoved harder, bruising his ribs against the glass, fighting the tide of himself, pressing from every direction. The light above stuttered. The heartbeat became a siren, and then he slipped through the crack. The room screamed without sound. Mirrors shattered in silence. The light died. Darkness swallowed him whole. The darkness on the other side wasn't empty. It was thick, textured, alive with the smell of dust and cold paint. Marshall staggered through the narrow gap, ribs scraped raw, hoodie tearing at the seam. The mirrors behind him slammed shut with a dull thud, like a vault ceiling. He spun, reaching for the crack, but the glass had already healed smooth. Only his reflection stared back, dozens of him, but this time their faces weren't aligned. Some glared, Some looked away, a few still, mouthed silent warnings. The hum was gone, the heartbeat too. Now there was just silence. He exhaled hard, sweat dripping from his brow. The floor beneath his sneakers felt different, rough, concrete, no longer polished glass. The sterile white glow had vanished, replaced by a low red shimmer that pulsed, faintly, like emergency lights buried too deep in fog. And there it was, the exit sign. Far down the hall, crooked and flickering, the letters glowed weakly, bleeding red onto the walls. He forced his legs to move, each step dragging as if gravity was heavier here. His breath echoed, bouncing off walls he couldn't see. Halfway down the hall, his phone vibrated. He pulled it out, chest tightening. The screen was black, except for a single message in white letters. "You're not alone." He froze. Something scraped behind him. Not footsteps, not nails. A drag, long and slow, like furniture sliding across stone. He whipped around. The mirrors were gone, replaced by endless shadow. "Who's there?" His voice cracked raw, echoing too loud. A whisper rose from the dark. Not spoken, not heartfelt. The same cadence as his own rap, syllables clicking into rhythm, but hollow, warped. He clutched his stomach as if the words were crawling under his skin. He stumbled back, colliding with the wall. A figure peeled itself out of the shadow hood. Up, head bowed, steps measured. When it lifted its face, Marshall's knees almost buckled. It was him, not a reflection, not a trick of glass. Flesh and breath and weight. His own eyes staring back, but colder, unblinking, as if they'd been carved out of static. "Say something," Marshall hissed. The double raised its chin. Its mouth opened. His own voice thundered out, flawless, sharp, carried by invisible speakers. Bars he had never written spilled into the hallway, vicious and intimate, cutting straight into scars no one should have known. Childhood humiliation bent into rhyme. Rehab confessions spat like daggers. His daughter's name turned into a weaponized hook. The exit sign at the end of the hallway flickered harder, struggling to stay lit. Marshall's chest heaved. He tried to spit back, forcing words through his throat, raw syllables torn from somewhere deeper than thought. They burst out messy, but real, jagged with pain. His voice cracked, but it was his. The sound made the walls tremble. The double didn't falter. It rapped smoother, stronger, feeding on the silence, its every line echoing like law. The air thickened. Marshall's breaths came shallow, head spinning. His phone buzzed again. He glanced down. Another message burned across the screen. "Don't let him finish." He looked up. The double smirked, pacing closer, verses rolling like thunder. The exit sign flickered, dimming to nothing more than a dying ember. Marshall clenched his fists. "Not tonight," he growled, voice shaking. He spat his verse louder, each word a hammer, each bar ripped from scars he'd sworn never to open. The hallway shook, concrete groaning like it might split. For the first time, the double faltered. Its voice skipped half a beat. Its smirk twitched. The exit sign pulsed brighter. Marshall pressed forward, throat tearing, voice cracking, but still alive. The double straightened, eyes cold, and whispered without sound, lips moving slow, final round. And then the lights died. The hallway was black now, so black it felt physical, pressing against his chest and choking his throat. Marshall stood frozen, fists balled, the weight of silence crushing harder than any beat. His breath fogged in front of him, caught in a light that wasn't there. Then came the sound. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, too heavy to be his own, too close to ignore. From the dark, his double-emerged hood still up, shoulders squared, that smirk welded to his face like it was born there. The exit sign at the far end sputtered once, twice, then steadied, bleeding faint red across the walls. The double lifted its head, its lips parted. Marshall's own voice poured out again, perfect cadence, flawless rhythm, venom polished to diamond. Each bar landed sharp, exposing memories Marshall had buried deep. Fights, overdoses, empty nights staring at walls. But the words weren't just about him, they were predictions. Futures twisted into rhyme, outcomes he hadn't lived but feared. You'll choke in the silence, fade on the stage, your name in the dirt, your legacy caged. The hallway shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. Marshall staggered back, his ribs aching under the force of it. His throat was raw, but he forced words out anyway, broken lines that came jagged and bloody. He wasn't spitting polished bars, he was spitting survival. The two voices collided in the air, clashing like steel. Each echo doubled, multiplied, turned the hallway into a storm of syllables. The exit sign flickered, brighter now, pulsing like it was sinking to Marshall's heartbeat. He pushed forward, every step a war. His double shadowed him, matching every move, grinning wider as if it had already won. "You're nothing but noise," Marshall rasped, his voice splitting but still carrying. "You don't get the last word. I do." The double tilted its head, eyes gleaming cold. It pressed a hand to its chest, and Marshall felt his own heart skipping in sync, almost stopping. Panic surged, but so did rage. He screamed into the void, verses tearing from his lungs like fire, each line carved raw from pain. The hallway cracked beneath them. Concrete split. Shadows peeled away like smoke. The double faltered, its flow stuttering. For the first time, it looked uncertain. Its smirk cracked, trembling at the edges. Marshall saw the exit flare bright red, burning through the dark. He roared. One last verse, every syllable jagged with defiance. "This is my voice. My verse, my life." The words detonated. The air imploded. The double shattered into static, fragments of shadow scattering like glass shards into the dark. Its scream was his own voice, stretched and broken. Before vanishing completely, Marshall collapsed to his knees, chest heaving, throat torn raw. Silence rushed in, heavy and absolute. The exit sign glowed steady now, no longer flickering. He forced himself up, legs trembling, and staggered toward the door. His hand closed around the cold bar. For a moment, the weight of choice hung in his chest. Then he pushed. Light exploded through the crack. The door crashed open with a metallic scream, and light poured through like a tidal wave. Marshall stumbled forward, blinded, arms raised. The red exit glow behind him was gone in an instant, sealed away like it had never existed. When his vision cleared, he was standing on a stage, but not one he recognized. The boards beneath his sneakers were polished to glassy black, stretching into a void with no edges. The seats that rose before him looked endless, rows upon rows disappearing into shadow. At first, they seemed empty, but as his eyes adjusted, he realized the seats were filled. Not with people, not exactly. Silhouettes, thousands of them, faceless, watching with heads tilted forward, their presence heavier than any crowd he had ever faced. A microphone stood at center stage, cord trailing into darkness. It pulsed faintly, as if it had its own heartbeat. Marshall's throat was raw, but instinct pulled him forward. Every step echoed too loud in the cavernous silence. He wrapped his fingers around the mic. It was freezing, the kind of cold that hurt to hold, but it was familiar, too like the weight of every night he'd ever stepped on stage. "Hello," his voice cracked out. The sound didn't bounce back. It sank into the air, devoured by silence. The silhouettes leaned forward, thousands of bodies shifting as one. No faces, no eyes. But the intent was clear. They wanted him to perform. Then the sky above the stage lit up with screens. Dozens, hundreds, thousands, every one of them showed him. Young Marshall with fire in his eyes, spitting verses on Detroit corners. Marshall, at his first big stage, sweating under tube-bright lights. Marshall in rehab, pale and hollow. Marshall with his daughter, smiling like the world was still worth something. Marshall, older, tired, jaw clenched. A million different lives, all his, all staring back. Some rapped silently, some laughed, some wept. A few pressed their hands against the inside of the glass, like prisoners begging to be freed. One by one, the screens flickered out. The younger hymns, the broken hymns, the triumphant hymns all gone, until only one screen remained. The smirking double, still alive, still watching. Its face filled the screen, larger than life, lips curling in victory. Slowly, deliberately, it mouthed one word, encore. Marshall's grip tightened on the mic. His knuckles went white. The boards beneath his feet trembled, a low rumble rising like the start of a drum roll. The silhouettes in the audience leaned forward further, a sea of faceless heads tilting in perfect unison. The air thickened with expectation, pressing on, his chest like a weight. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, screen cracked, almost afraid to look. A single message glowed in white letters. Finale complete. The next song begins now. The stage lights blazed suddenly, blinding white. The microphone in his hand grew hot, humming with static, shaking like it wanted to tear itself free. The faceless silhouettes rose to their feet in one wave, an army of shadows standing at attention dot above. The smirking version leaned closer to the glass of its screen. Its mouth opened wider, lips forming the shape of words Marshall couldn't hear but understood in his bones. "You can't leave." The lights around him burst, flooding the void with white fire. Marshall screamed into the mic, not words, just raw sound before the world went black, and in the darkness the echo came back. Not his voice, the smirks,